The Meeples Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Firestorm Games, and the generous donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. The Meeples Miniatures podcast, episode 269. Everything you ever wanted to know about Six, but were too afraid to ask. Part 2. With hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and guest Per Broden. This show was recorded on the 26th of May, 2019. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples Miniatures podcast. This is part 2 of the show that we recorded with Per Broden back at the end of May. Apologies, this has taken at least a week longer to produce than what I originally anticipated. Obviously, after recording this, we had a couple of busy weeks, what with the UK Games Expo, and then Operation Market Larden, and all the preparation work needed to get stuff done for that. At that point, I also went down with a really bad cold, which basically kind of put me out of action the best part of a week. And so many apologies for the fact that here we are, and it's the middle of May, and we've only just got part 2 of this show. Hopefully it's been worth waiting for. I know a lot of people enjoy the first part of our chat with Per. Much more coming up. So sit back and enjoy the next couple of hours of our continued chat with Per Broden as we discuss what we've been up to as far as our hobby is concerned, and then chat about all things to do with 6mm gaming, plus another couple of subjects as well. Enjoy. So it's time to chat about what we've been gaming, what we've been painting, and maybe some hobby tips and tricks that we've been up to. So this I'll go to start this time around. Not a huge amount done. Like I say, I've been kind of collecting stuff again for my next batch, knowing in the back of my mind that I desperately need to finish a few figures and a couple of bits of scenery for Market Larden, for my game I'm putting on at Market Larden. So I've been painting some samurai. I'm kind of about 2/3 through them. I've got 3. They're kind of they're guys carrying palanquins, which are it's kind of Japanese equivalent of a sedan chair sort of thing. So I'm kind of partway through painting those. That's about it as far as painting is concerned. I want to crack on with all my fantasy stuff, and it's almost like this Market Larden thing has suddenly become a bit of an inconvenience. But there we go. So I was So as I say, we went to Partisan, so saw some interesting games and what have you there. Games we've been playing primarily had several games of Journeys of Middle-earth. We've managed to get to the end of our first campaign, which ended in abject failure, especially when Legolas died again. Thank you, Jeff, for your encouraging words on Legolas. I think the exact phrase was, "Serves me right, the pointy-eared git." something like that.
It was something like that, yeah.
It was something. It was something along those lines. Yes, never liked him anyway. But no, yeah. So enjoying that immensely. So yeah, had a great time. Had a great time with that. Finally got another game of Gloomhaven in, having not been able to get all four of us together for several weeks. So we are. Ooh. I'm not quite sure exactly how far we are. I think we're about 2/3 of the way through that campaign. But we're at the point where we're actively starting to retire characters and get our second characters. But yeah, that's enjoying that. And then because Mr. Luff wasn't available last week, we finally got to play a game of Zombicide Black Plague.
Aha, yes. And do I dare ask?
We just played the introductory scenario. Yeah, because it was kind of sorting it all out and getting it all sorted, and because apparently because Dave basically hadn't opened the box since you'd given it to him.
The beautifully he'd sorted it all out. It was all sorted.
Well, yeah, but it was all the cards and stuff. He kind of and of course he hadn't read the rules.
Oh no,
because that's my job. Yeah. So anyway, they both really enjoyed it. My thoughts are still. Okay. Yeah. I think the introductory scenario does not do the game justice.
No, it's a very simple, just run around.
It's a very simple run around, and you can see how the mechanics are going. I think my initial impressions remain in that it's all right.
Yeah,
but it's not a game. It's not a game I would rush out and buy.
You don't need to.
Well, no, quite, because somebody else is doing it. Yeah. Okay. So that's me. So not so much painting. I mean, hopefully over the course of the bank holiday weekend, I'll get everything I need to done for Market Lawn, which will leave me at least a few days to kind of finish putting the scenario together. Not that it's last minute at all. It's all in my head, but I've just not kind of actually got around to kind of, doing the final flourishes and bits and pieces, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's me. Per, what have you been playing recently? What have you been up to hobby-wise?
I haven't done much playing. We played with my son some battle cards. I bought another kind of trip back to the old days. It's a really fun game, actually. We played a lot of Gaslands before, and it has a lot of elements that are similar. Of course, it doesn't use maneuver dials and so on, but you have to be mindful about your speed, etc., maneuver around it. It's really nice to kind of just pick something off the shelf and not spending time to set it up and so on. And my son, who is in that age where he really takes that on board, that thing, and we have actually some really fun time with it. I mean, this is what is it, 30-year-old game or something like that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And still, and we used to play it when I was a kid, and I again bought it for the purpose of kind of enjoying it, playing with him, and we had some good time. We actually occasionally get some of the others involved as well, which is always a bonus, so that's good. But hobby-wise, I have this piece of mat for this Poltava project. It's a 16 by 5 foot mat that I'm working on. ABBA sang about Waterloo and all this stuff, but really, Poltava is what they should have sang about. It's the biggest defeat in military history, and it's really painful for me to do this battle, because I kind of prefer to do the battles where Sweden won, gloriously, and there are quite a few of those, but this is really the biggest of that campaign. It's a battle 1709, and it's really the last kind of major battle. Well, there are a few others afterwards, but it's really where Russia goes ahead of Sweden as the ultimate superpower in that region of the world. So it's a sad day for Sweden. It's a glorious day for Russia. So it depends where you look at it. But anyway, I'm setting up this table at Joy of Six in about 5 weeks time now. And when I do my best, I tend to do I have battle mats, etc., which I use, that I just roll out. But for these show games, I tend to do the mat. I used to use kind of 2 by 2 feet boards, but I kind of always get irritated by this kind of gaps, And I thought, so I started 4 years ago, I did the first mat. And I basically use like a canvas material that has a plastic backing on the back. It's polythene or whatever this material is called. Anyway, so I used 16 feet, which is the normal length of production in this country. As you know, if you want to buy a sheet material, it's normally 12 feet long, etc. It's not produced in 16 feet lengths, this material. So you have to kind of glue 2 pieces of fabric-coated polythene together. Polythene is kind of famous for one thing, and that you can't really glue it, And so anyway, putting them together, I went around and I asked different people about advice and so on. I called a lot of companies and asked them, could you do this in 16 feet? And they said, yeah, how much do you want to buy? And I said 1 sheet, and it kind of got a little bit quiet on the other side of the phone, There wasn't really the kind of quantities they had in mind. And then I had this idea, we're going to try to stick it together in some way. I talked to a builder friend of mine who said, yeah, you have this thing, and it's called something, sorry for swearing now, but it's called something like Sticks Like Shit, basically is the name of the product. And I tried that out, but of course it didn't work, yeah. So basically what I do is I put them together and I put this kind of, have you used this kind of acrylic paste before, like window sealant?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically the way this mat works, then, to explain, is that you basically mix acrylic sealant, which is like silicone if people don't know what the acrylic is. But silicone is not good for painting. So use an acrylic kind of similar window sealant. You mix it with sand and with some paint. And then I use a little bit of PVA glue as well. And you spread it over this kind of textile surface. And then it dries. And then you basically get this kind of rubbery kind of mat. And because you put sand and stuff, you kind of get structure in your mat. So you can dry brush it and make it to look the same as your bases, etc. But basically, it's now being stick together by the paste itself, so it's very fragile, this mat, yeah? So it's 16 feet long, and I'm kind of trying to do it in, basically, the only biggest place I have in the house is the lounge, so it's difficult to kind of maneuver it around. But I've been working with this mat. I've done it before, but it's kind of sweaty business, etc. So if there is someone out there who does this kind of canvas in longer lengths than 12 feet, plastic back, please let me know. I would like to have one, or maybe just do it 12 feet next time. I also worked on this forest, as I said, some kind of seedy forest. I think if you go to Twitter, you can check that out. I kind of documented a little bit what I'm doing there. It's a too long story perhaps to go through here, but so mainly kind of doing the back end of a big project. All the fancy stuff, painting models, etc., is done. But it's just this hard work to actually do this terrain. I sometimes wish I just go to one of these mat makers and say, could you print me this? But there is that little extra in actually rolling out something that you made yourself on the day. And I take a certain level of personal pride in that. So I'm sticking to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Okay, Mr. Hobbs, what have you been up to?
Not a huge amount because of work, really. I've hardly picked up a paintbrush. I think the only thing I've painted in the last 2.5 weeks are some Silhouette for Mortal Gods. So 8 of them.
It's unusual for you.
Yeah, I just haven't been in the zone, shall we say, so I haven't been forcing myself. But I have been playing a couple of games. So since the last show with Ralph, we decided to try a Hoplomachia, whatever it's called, and it's good. Oh my god, it's a good game. It's crunchy as hell. It's a really, really deep down crunchy game. We played 2 games. The first time we played, we just played the sort of opening part of the battle, with the light troops going out and the core troops. Because basically, you've got 2 types of troops. You've got your core part of the army, which is like usually sort of hoplites and stuff like that. And then you've got your light troops, which sort of fly around. So the beginning of the battle, you've got your light troops going out and sort of skirmishing in the centre whilst your your core troops sort of move forward so they're in a position ready to start charging into each other and doing the meat grind a bit. So the first time we played the sort of first part of that with the light troops going out, and the second game we just played was just looking at how these large battle lines come together and how they fight.
Yeah.
It is an outstanding game. It's absolutely amazing. It's the first game I think I played, first large battle game, which sort of felt how I perceived a Greek hoplite battle should go. You know, it wasn't like I was playing a game just with some hoplite figures. It was like, you know, you really in using some of the tactics that we think they used. Because obviously we don't really know what they used. You know, you've got to. So that is an outstanding game. It's not the easiest to get into. I'll be honest with you. It doesn't read very well, and there's a lot of Greek in there because everything is used in the Greek terminology.
Yeah.
But once you get your head around it, it's outstanding game. So really enjoying that.
Yeah, it was interesting because you were tweeting. It's like, perhaps we need to revisit this game in the show. Yeah, we kind of like talked about it in passing, and actually, that's probably the game we should have been talking about in the first place.
To be honest with you, yeah, I think so. But I mean, we'll have a little chat about Perfect Captain in a second, I think.
Yeah.
But great game. So we've done that. I've also yesterday had a quick game of Seven Continents, or I've started a game of Seven Continents using the new expansion stuff, which is great. Because I haven't been painting and I wanted a bit of a break, I decided to pull out an old computer game called Mech Commander 2.
Oh, crikey.
Which came out in the year 2000 or so.
Yes.
And see if I can get that running on Windows 10.
How'd you get on with that then?
It works.
Really?
Yeah, mainly because Microsoft put it out for open source, put all the source code out a few years ago. And a lot of very clever people have got it working on Windows 10 and have released it for free just to download. So I'm playing Mech Commander 2 again after all these years. And I'm loving it.
Oh my word.
And the last thing was, last weekend, I was due to meet up with Ralph and the aforementioned Andrew for the role-playing stuff, and one of Andrew's mates. And we were going to be playing Glorantha God's Wars, which is a Greg Stafford game. No, Greg Stafford. It's a game that's just come out from I think from the team who've done Cthulhu Wars. It's a proper Gloranthan big battle, you know, end of the universe style game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we were going to play that. So we'd all arranged to meet up at Firestorm. So I had a look on Firestorm's sites.
Wasn't it kind of like a War Machine National?
World. It was the War Machine World Champion.
It was War Machine. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I saw that they had just the one event of Firestorm. And I thought, that's War Machine. It won't be that many, you know. They had 180 players in Firestorm. Apparently, it's one of the biggest wargaming competitive events in the world. People have travelled from America, Russia, basically all over the world for this tournament, this 2-day tournament. Yeah, so we didn't play Gloranthan God's War, because it was a bit full. So we took a walk into Cardiff, to find this board game cafe.
Oh, cool.
Which is called A Chance and Counters, which if you read it, basically sounds like Chance Encounters.
Yes.
And we popped into there and we had a cup of coffee and we chatted to the people, and it's lovely. It's a lovely little board game cafe. Good food, very fine drinks, and you basically get on there. And if you want to play games, it's £5 per person. You get a 4-hour slot, and they got 500 board games there that you can just play.
Of course, I was going to say, what's their library like? But yeah, half decent by the sound of things.
Half decent, yeah, and you can bring your own as well.
Cool.
So yeah, so we looked at it, I thought, oh, this is nice, nice and comfy. I mean, I know the Firestorm do rentals of board games, which is brilliant. But this just thought, oh, it's right in the centre of Cardiff, so we might be popping back there to try out some games, because there was some games there that me and Ralph saw, which we fancied, like Terraforming Mars and...
Terraforming Mars is a stonking game. It's a really good game, yeah.
But yeah, so that was that. So that's pretty much me.
Mike, there's one thing on what did you call these rules again? The Greek rules, the hoplite.
Hoplomantia.
Okay, I'll tell you what. It's really encouraging, I think, when you talk, because I feel sometimes that we kind of there's a lot of war games rules out there that are really good, but it's really nice when they actually capture that kind of spirit and that kind of when you actually feel because that they actually are reflecting that period in place. Because I bought quite a few rule sets which kind of on the cover it says it's this and that, and then you kind of think about it, you think, yeah, well, this is really generic, and you could apply it to. And I think a lot of the kind of skirmish section perhaps are there, but actually increasingly I think also a lot of the kind of big battle as well, that there is sometimes there has a nice quirky mechanism, and you kind of fall in love with that when you play. But then actually when you feel like you're saying that it's not just quirkiness in it, but actually it applies to it. For me, for example, like we play something like Chain of Command, it kind of feels like a World War II game. I know it's been applied to different situations, but it's really that small unit command structure, and you can apply it to other places, but it kind of works to that setting. And I think that's great, and I will look into that, because that appeals to me. If you're going to invest time in putting all that stuff on the table, it's not always the stuff that immerses you, but it's the rules themselves. And that sounds good, encouraging, and they are free as well. Yeah, so
exactly. Yeah, it's all free. I mean, they request that you give some money to a named charity, which is always worth doing. But yeah, it's a discussion me and Neil have had a few times, and we were going to try and cover it on a show one day. Is you've got lots of rules that cover a large period of time, especially ancients. Which is great because it means you can play, one set of rules, you can play that whole period of time, which is great. But sometimes you sort of get into the feeling where an army from biblical times should therefore be able to take on an army from Renaissance times, because they're using the same set of rules. And you kind of see it being played sometimes at tournaments and stuff. But, and that has an appeal, and I'm not knocking that. But sometimes you can sort of lose some of the feel of a particular period, because, warfare evolved during the period of history, and it usually, especially with sort of ancient games, it evolved very, very, it evolved in a very small period of history, but also period of space of community, shall we say. So, I mean, you could take an army that's maybe fought in Europe in 1000 AD, and take an army that fought in China or Japan in the same year, and they got completely different tactics, because their tactics have evolved against their opponents. So this is what I liked about Hoplomantia, is it just covers Peloponnesian War. It covers 431 to 404 BC.
Yeah. I mean, you have situations in history, very few. For example, the conquistadors, when they came over, that's a little bit like some of these games, where the Aztecs had a totally different way of waging war, totally different kind of philosophy of it, and they used to have these flower wars, which were more or less games that was played, and then suddenly you get these guys coming with their muskets, and they are some of those battle very asymmetric, where you have the if you wish, perhaps different than some other asymmetric in modern times, where you have a lot of the other side kind of being in that position. But that to me is for example, an example where if you look at some of the battles from that time, it's very difficult to simulate it, I guess, because you read kind of like there are a handful of men that are fighting thousands. It's kind of fascinating, in that sense. So, but yeah, I think it's nice when you get these rule sets that that feels specific. So things you kind of read about in the accounts kind of fit in, rather than it just being, oh, these were good guys, they have +3 or something like that. But actually that there is something that's been thought out to actually make that work in the game specifically, and it wouldn't work anywhere else. I find that fascinating. But of course it is limiting, to some degree, because but if you really want that experience, that's what I like. So.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I mean, yes, the Perfect Captain. I mean, Ralph came onto this. I've heard about them. I never played them. They got a series of 15 games on their site, and they're all free. Now, I've only played Hobblemankia, and Hobblemankia has really piqued my interest because it feels right. But I'm looking through the rest of them. I'm thinking, there's some games here which I really fancy trying. But as you say, they're all very specific. Because you mentioned a Crown of Paper.
Crown of Paper, which is the campaign game, and then there is and then A Coat of Steel, which is the miniatures rules, which so you can just play A Crown of Paper on its own as a standard, a map campaign game. Or you can then, anytime you actually have a battle, you can then immediately move that to the tabletop and use A Coat of Steel. And again, it piqued my interest because they turned around and went, right, okay, what we're trying to do is going really kind of deep delve into each period. These really piqued my interest since we were kind of looking at War of the Roses anyway. So I want to take a very close look at these. These look really interesting.
Yeah, they've done a similar sort of thing with Hobblemankia. They've done a campaign system, which essentially is a board game called. I'm going to destroy this pronunciation, so I'm very sorry to any Greek people listening. Stratiokia. Which is, it's a board game that you can then use to drive your games of Hobblemankia. Very interesting stuff. I've done Byzantine ones. There's War of 1812, which again, I'm very interested in. But yeah, I'm going to have a good look at this. I don't think Perfect Captain is actually supporting their games anymore. I think they've been doing this for quite a while. But, the games are there and they're free, and go and have a look at them. And if you like the game, give a little bit to charity. Because on their downloads page, they've got links to charities that they suggest that you support. So, look at the work that's gone into these games. If you like them, chuck a few quid to the charity.
Indeed. Yes. Cool stuff. Right. I said we were very quickly going to have. I was going to talk about come back to contrast paints.
Oh yeah.
And I happened to spot that there was a guy on YouTube was saying, okay, he thinks if you want to have a go at the similar sort of thing, but either can't wait for the paint range to come out because it's not out until middle of June, I think. Or you want to try a slight alternative. He came up with what he thinks is an equivalent formula if you happen to have the stuff with you. So he was using Army Painter Quick Shade Medium, because you can buy just the medium. Which is great, like especially if you want to do, like you say, thin out your quick shade and maybe do blending or that sort of thing. I must admit, I did pick up a couple of those at the time. But he uses quick shade medium, obviously whatever paint that you're using, a bit of airbrush flow improver, and then perhaps a drop or two of water. And that is distilled water, not tap water. Just to kind of, perhaps water it down a little bit, just make it a little bit thinner. But yeah, essentially it's the quick shade medium, a bit of flow improver, paint, and a bit of water. And he said, it's a bit trial and error. And of course, this is the difference. Whereas if you just went and bought a pot of GW, it's all there ready mixed for you. So he said, it's slightly trial and error in the mixing. But he said if you wanted to have a go at it and see what effects you could do, that was a particular way of doing it. It was quite interesting. But it would be interesting to see that alongside actually what GW have done. But yeah, that was I thought that was an alternative way, because I must admit, in some ways, I was thinking it's really interesting what Games Workshop are doing, but it's effectively revisiting something that Army Painter did actually several years ago. Because if you look at the Army Painter range and using quick shades and stuff, have been out for a while. It's just that now GW are doing it. Okay, they're changing how it's done a little bit, but now all of a sudden everybody's jumping up and down and shouting about it. But Army Painter have been doing it for ages.
I think they're different product now. I think the Army shader coloured shades they're like washes.
Yeah,
they're just washes. So they're very similar to the GW washes that are the Villager. Well, the Villager ones are always weird. These contrast paints look like a slightly thicker version.
Yes.
So it's more of a translucent paint that will gather in shade. So yeah, I think they're subtly different. They're almost like a thickened shade, shall we say?
Yes. It's
more pigment in that.
Yeah, really interested to see. And someone I think someone posted the weekend. So yesterday I think it was. Yeah, somebody posted. Okay, this is what playing around with some, because obviously some people have got some for review purposes, and says okay they've just done some over. Because they're saying okay, putting it over either a white or a bone base coat. This guy did some over silver.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Obviously, it just changes things completely.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm more interested in seeing, is what you can do by using other painters as the base. And not just using it as this is a quick way of painting a cloak. Just paint it over white and you're done. But trying over different undercoats, trying with different paints, seeing how you can blend it together, seeing what effects you can get. So, all good stuff.
Indeed.
And anything that makes painting easier for people who don't like painting is always a good thing.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so time to take a break, and when we come back, it's time to head into our main subject for the show.
6 movie stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. The Meeples Miniatures podcast is very proud to be sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, purveyors of award-winning wargames rules. Now, the Lardies, not content with having one of the finest wargames podcasts in the shape of the Lardy Oddcast, they have now launched Lard TV on YouTube. A program that gives you regular insights into all aspects of the Lardy hobby. Recent episodes includes a playthrough of a Swamp Fox supplement for sharp practice with Rich and Nick, as well as Rich taking you through a terrain build from his recent Chain of Command Far East project. Many more things are planned for this channel, and it can be found on YouTube at the Two Fat Lardies channel. Alternatively, search for Lard TV. And don't forget, you can find everything to do with Two Fat Lardies at their website, including the web store, a supporting blog, and a huge and vibrant forum. That's at twofatlardies.co.uk. Two Fat Lardies. Play the period, not the rules. So here we are into the main subjects for this show, and obviously one of the reasons we wanted to chat about Per, because it's not just the fact that you do 6mm, but it's the way that you approach it. and then what you've done with turning around and saying, okay, I'm not just doing what you might expect in 6mm, but I'm actually looking at approaching different rule sets and showing you that you don't just have to do big battles in 6mm. There are you can convert other rule sets to use that particular scale, and it's kind of what you become known for. Especially anyone who looks at roller1.com will see all the stuff that pairs up to, and various inspirations for doing different things. So this is why we wanted to chat to Per about 6mm. So you originally stated that when you first you kind of got chatting to Mr. Berry, and then were bought the Great Northern War kind of battle box set for a birthday present, and then horribly painted 9 Cavalry.
Yeah.
So at that point, why did you carry on with 6mm? What really attracted you to the scale, and how have you found it affect your gaming?
All right, so I carried on, basically slightly exaggerated maybe in the beginning there, but I think I painted those first miniatures like I would have painted bigger scales, and I kind of, tried detail this and that, and although all that detail is there, but when you paint 6mm miniatures, really the kind of careful application of color, make sure your color is kind of vibrant and strong, but then you need to use some kind of washes to get all those details out. And basically what I didn't know then was the fact that it's normally best to use like a dark undercoat. Now, I used white undercoat at the time. I then use black, but I use now gray. I buy this primer from Poundland. It's a gray car primer.
Mm-hmm.
I spray it on. And then I have a little mix of ink with some distilled water, so it's not like very much, but I then use that and I apply it on top of the miniatures, because it gives that kind of in the recesses, it gives you a dark, and it also gives you then a stage between the dark ink in the recesses, and then any kind of the gray gets also darker, so anything you kind of miss has that, so you get almost like a two-tone shade to it. I don't paint carefully, and I try to focus on painting kind of quick, but I always have kind of thick coat of paint. So the kind of traditional kind of mix it down to kind of milkiness, which perhaps you use on bigger miniatures, and you use different, you use layers of paint. I don't tend to use. So I tend to have the paint kind of quite as I get it out, like the layer paint from as it comes. Yes, I don't tend to mix it down like I would do if I paint a 28mm miniature.
Yeah.
I try to be precise when I do it. A lot of people kind of use different methods, and maybe from a distance it looks the same, but I try to actually paint each detail, quickly. And I paint in bulk. I always paint, 100 6mm is my normal kind of favorite. And yes, it is a monotonous job. You paint everybody arm, but you do it 100 times, it's quite quick, and you kind of learn how to paint them after a while, because in a typical code for 6mm, you have, if you have like infantry, that tends to be all actually the same. And then apart from the kind of command and the drummer and so on, and just go through it like paint all the arms, paint all the this and that, and once I block painted it, I then use, I use something called Winsor Newton, and it's called chestnut brown. And it's like an ink, and it has like a chestnutty, almost reddish brown hint to it. And I apply that to all my miniatures in 6mm. And it almost like one of those army painter stuff, the dip method, yeah? But it's on 6mm. And for whatever reason, it appeals to me, and it creates that additional depth on the colors, yeah, if you apply them in the right way. And it tends to work better the more kind of sharper colors you have to it. I sometimes do a little bit of artistic freedoms as well, so I might add some kind of contrast color to the uniform that perhaps isn't 100% correct, yeah? For example, very often cavalry would have their gloves on when they were riding, I don't do my cavalry with gloves, so I make sure that you can see the buffs on their kind of, the kind of arms, with the collars on the facing collars on the arms properly, and things like that. So I tend to paint in bulk. Secondary, I base my stuff in a special way. I actually use brown sand. I buy brown sand from eBay, which is more expensive than normal sand, but it means I don't have to sog around and paint it brown afterwards, or have this kind of small mixtures of paste, that I have to try to fit in between the miniatures. So I basically tend to put PVA glue on top, put my miniatures on, and then scatter this brown sand. That means they are done. And all I need to do now is to carefully dry brush around them, yeah?
Yeah.
I just don't have time to have this muddy mixture and, face it around. For me, basing, I'm talking about producing, hundreds of bases for each of these projects. So I don't have time to sit there and spend, half an hour on each base. So for me, it is PVA glue, stick your figure, sand on, let it dry, and then Bob's your uncle or whatever. But it is, so over the years, I developed a lot of techniques in terms of doing things quicker. And one is the kind of production line to it. And everyone will say that, but there's two secrets with it. One is to get on and do it, yeah? Because it will be frustrating when you start painting 6mm, but it will go away, yeah? I mean, I see people who say, how can you paint something small? And then they kind of freehand some details on a little belt, on their Space Marine, yeah? And I'm thinking, well, if you can do that, what's your problem with 6mm? So it's getting over that attitude, in that sense to yourself. And I had that as well. But because for me, I wanted to create those battle paintings from old, and really to play Great Northern War. Yes, you can do it in skirmish stuff and so on. And it's very interesting. I actually just read a book about skirmish warfare during the Great Northern War. And that's really it's almost written like a sharp practice, compendium or whatever, all the stuff it covers. But that's great, and that's interesting too. But what I want to do are the big battles, and 6mm for me is that kind of middle ground between what that looks like. And yes, you could go down to 2mm, and I see a lot of great stuff with that. But I'm really still interested in getting some of that detail I can get in. So 6mm works for me on this, and also I'm too heavily invested. I have thousands of these bases now, so I don't want to kind of start changing. Also, the fact is that with Bacchus 6mm miniatures, which, I mean, there's a lot of manufacturers out there, but they're really the one range that kind of covers all the aspects that needs to be covered. Heroics and Ross has a range as well, but I find Heroics and Ross more difficult. I think you need to be a better painter than me to get a good result from them, because they have a little less detail. Now I'm talking about the Great Northern War range. Some of the newer stuff is Malborian range, because they don't have a specific one. Some of the newer stuff it blows you away, to be honest, compared to the older stuff. So I think Heroics, some people have a view about their quality, which is perhaps not really there today. Today, a lot of the new stuff is totally different than some of the earlier things. But basically, if you have good enough detail, then you can block paint, and then you can wash it, and it will highlight those details. For example, there is a 7-year war horse grenadier, which is an amazing sculpt that Bacchus do. And I painted some of that, I think, end of last year, earlier this year. And when I put that wash on, all that detail came out, and it was beautiful. So with 6mm, you also have to then allow yourself to take that famous step back as well and look at your unit there on the table. And although occasionally, and I try to not to do it, but after a while, your skill gets better. I actually do not aim to paint them to look very good. Sometimes they do anyway, and really sometimes people can be discouraged, because we expect to have that kind of in-your-face picture of them, yeah. But actually, you're kind of missing the whole point if you need to see your 6mm to that level of detail. So therefore, take that step back. Say, does that look like a guys on the battlefield getting ready. And of course, if you can accept that, then suddenly you can accept that only took 60 millimeter or 2-inch frontage to do so. And suddenly your table now becomes a fantastic canvas to paint that battle with your miniatures on. So for me, that is important. We also get a lot of, so therefore the traditional wargames photo of the detail is difficult to get with 6mm unless someone spent an unreasonable amount of time on painting them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So therefore you get that balance, and I think that's another reason why perhaps it's not too much shown in the press, because it's not perhaps so appealing in the detail, but at the same time, it is getting those high level battle shots that I really, really like. And when you go to Joy of Six, for example, they used to be able to go a level up, because it was like in a open kind of room in the unit there, and you could go up a level and stand basically on a balcony, and you look down at those battles. They look quite amazing, in the sense that you felt like you were helicopter viewing it. So really, for me, it's kind of painting them is relatively easy, and I think for me, I try to take care when I paint like things like face, so I leave some kind of black, to shine through, because in the distance, if a face isn't totally kind of only skin color, it actually looks better from a distance if you have some blacks coming in, because it looks like shadow from the hat or whatever. And then also every scale has, so for example, my Great Northern War, everyone more or less have tricorn hats, and try to on that kind of on the brims of the hat, so to speak, that's areas to be careful about and make sure. So if you paint those nicely, and then you have based it nicely, you're kind of halfway there,
Yeah.
So, but it is, going from the 28mm where you paint all the details and you need to see it in your face, it's just taking that step and actually say, look, that's not what I'm doing here, and it's being said a lot about this paint the unit and so on, but it is true, it is that case. And actually, when I take those 9 cavalry that I painted, that I said were dreadful first, well, actually, if I would put them on a table now, base them up and so on, they probably wouldn't look too much out of place, But it was just that I looked at it in a different way, in the wrong way, I would say, because I was comparing what someone has spent, 6 hours painting an individual 28mm figure on something I painted in 2 minutes, So it's the kind of wrong measure, and I think that's quite important to think. So for me, it is, if you want to create battles that, for me, looks more interesting, do that. If you want to do skirmish, or if you're Simon Miller, you just have a lot of space and a lot of miniatures. He really does 6mm battles blown up, I think. That's,
yeah.
So I'm not saying that, but it is, when you take that step back, his games looks wonderful, and I'm not saying a 6mm looks better, but it allows you to tell a different story. For example, on a battle, you can put the things that are happening. So, for example, I'm doing this Poltava this year, and it's basically, I told you this is a 16 feet map. Really, the main battle only happens to about half of that battlefield. So it has about double the space than you would actually need in the scale we are using. And the reason for that was that there was a siege that happened at Poltava itself. And I wanted to have that city there. So I basically built this 2x2 feet model of Poltava that is part of the terrain, if you wish. But I also think that when you tell a story about the battle, so you can actually say there was a siege at Poltava just before, they actually point at it. And also I also saw it as an opportunity to show how a typical camp of the period was. So I've done another, if you wish, a stylized version of a camp in those areas. And also one of the most important things in the battle was on the march to the battlefield, the Swedish side was actually confronted with this redoubt that the Russians had built up, and had a special kind of T formation, if you wish, where the top of the T is towards where the Russians were, and then you have this, if you wish, the pole of the T, if you wish, coming towards the Swedes. So it kind of forced the Swedes to deal with that first on their marching up, and that causes a lot of frustration for the Swedes. And it was just to be able to tell that story properly, because people have done Poltava before, but not really like that. So if I would have done that in 28 mil, which I've seen a few times, you have to kind of make a lot of sacrifices in terms of ground scale, etc., which I didn't need to do on my big kind of canvas. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go more into the sort of scale, as it's portrayed on the game, I'd like to sort of just jump back to the painting stuff, because I think this is one of the big problems that a lot of people who haven't done 6mm struggle with. And I think you gave some great hints there about, the undercoating in grey, giving it a black wash, which I've never thought about doing with 6mm, the block coating, and then using the sort of washer of the top. But the thing I wanted to ask is, the thing I've always, because I did actually have the Great Northern War box set that you had from Bacchus.
Yeah.
Which I started painting. The thing I always found is the blue of the uniforms for the Swedes, especially.
Yeah.
As soon as I put a wash, because I paint similar to you, but I painted from a black undercoat up, and I use vibrant colours, because I think that's the key with 6mm, is to use very bright colours. But as soon as I put a wash onto them, I found that the blue went very muted.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether using this chestnut brown might be the answer to it.
Well, I think yes, and occasionally, and don't tell anyone, but I have occasionally highlighted some blue as well, because I find sometimes, because ideally you want to use, Vallejo has a color called royal blue, yeah, and that really is the one. But I have many different blues that I use, and that royal blue is good, and if you put that on, you get a little bit of shine onto it. If you put the Winsor Newton on, so it's a good one. But I have quite a lot of variation on what blue I use, just to kind of reflect on the fact that they came to different places and they basically said, I want blue, and as the war went on, then you get a little bit liberal with it as well. So another one looks really cool. Is to use occasionally it's a one called pastel blue, and it's very kind of light bluish, but there was some regiment to use that I tend to use that for to detail cannons and etc. And then you use that on top of it. It gives a nice shine as well. So, but royal blue is your ticket to glory, and Winsor Newton on top, I would say.
Yeah. So I guess the thing is, if people who want to play 6mm but are intimidated by the painting, get in there, try it.
It is, because it's you can but read and check what people do, and I just find that style. But again, I think you said it to Neil in a total different context the other day when I listened to a show a few weeks back when talked about War of the Roses. It's get a pack and try it out. Don't need to buy the whole army to do it. And Peter sells you a pack for £7 with postage. You have a tenner, and if it's something for you, it's kind of worth investing £10 on maybe a lifetime of joy. You never know. So it's a cheap ticket to Nirvana potentially.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask about basing.
Yeah.
Because this is the big thing I always find with basing. It's, when you're doing the smaller scales, sometimes it's the base that makes the model.
Yes.
Because you're literally doing little dioramas on there. And I'm thinking of what I'm doing now with sort of the 2mm. I'm also painting some 6mm. You'd be very proud of me, Per. I'm doing some my Gloranthan 6mm.
Yeah, I've seen them. They're very nice. I really like it, and I think you're doing very well, Mike.
Thank you.
I think that's all right. So basing. So I'm stuck on basing, because I started using a specific basing method when I first started, and I kind of decided I'm going to do it all in that way.
Yeah.
However, it's very similar to what Peter Berry is doing. It's actually a little bit of a copy of it, because I bought a basing set from him. And then I couldn't find it when I was going to actually base the miniatures, and I didn't have time to order it before I actually needed to put them on the table. So I used 3 different colors, which I thought were similar. So I first used first brown base, and I use now brown sand, which you can buy. It's normally called mocha or dark brown sand and so on. But check it first, because otherwise you get something that is too pale. It's a very dark sand. We're talking like a burnt umber kind of color, yeah? And that's my base first, base color. And then I dry brush a kind of a pale brown, if you wish, a very, I think I have it somewhere on the webpage how they look like, but very pale brown. And then I have a kind of a pale kind of terracotta-ish color on top, which is kind of a pale brown with a little bit of red on. And then the final layer is a very pale yellow, yeah? And what I find that the yellow does is kind of contrast a little bit later on when you put on the static grass, yeah? And I put a little bit here, there, and everywhere. It's kind of yellowish, and it tends to work great with the green, that you put the green on top. The static grass. I have used the same static grass for all my 1,000 bases now. Exactly the same product, and it's the one you can buy from Callistra. That green, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I use a little bit of their dark green. So I probably more of that than my children one day will find these bags of static grass, and they'll think, does this have any value? And there's few bags there, so I'll probably last my lifetime out. So because what I didn't want to do is what I want to do is that a model I create because we'll come back to this thing that I'm doing Great Northern War, so I want a miniature I did for a battle, 10 years ago, to be able to stand next to my guys I'm doing today, in case I need to. So therefore, I'm kind of haven't looked back to basic method. And I've seen certain things that I would say to myself, yeah, maybe should have done it like that. But I feel like it's good enough to kind of stick to it. But I think you're right. Make sure you base things. And also make sure you cover things. I mean, this is a personal bugbear of mine is, when you can see the bases, and people tend to use too little kind of glue or whatever, but cover that things, because as soon as you see that it looks like there's a squarish feature here next to the guys standing on this nice base and nice painted you've done, for me the immersion is slightly lost for a moment when I think, oh gosh, that's actually just some piece of lead sitting on top of a base. Hide a little bit those features, because you very rarely find this kind of straight line in nature, that base is kind of showing. So for me it is, basing is very important, and try to stay consistent, and the added feature, of course, is, as I said, I do my own mats, my own ground, is that I use exactly the same colors when I dry brush my mat and when I add the grass to it, so it all kind of fits together. And for me, the best one I've done personally is a few years back. I did a battle called Lesnaya, and it's 1708. It was a Joy of 6 2017, yeah. And basically, it all kind of fits together nicely with forest and with the bases, and I've actually thought, wow, when I put that out first time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people painting or basing up 6mm and not using flock. They sort of paint the foliage on the base, so that they'll paint the bases green and brown, or they'll put splotches on there. And I'm never sure whether that's a right or wrong way of doing it. It can look really effective when it's done right.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is something about having that extra little bit of texture on there. And I'm using for my 2mm stuff. I'm using a very, very fine texture. It's like a spongy texture.
Yeah.
It's almost like dust. It's almost like greeny dust. And that kind of works because, even though that's good, you can't see anything. You wouldn't see the foliage on the ground. But it just gives you a slightly different texture to the base, doesn't it? I think that's the key.
Yeah, and also sometimes, and this is back again to the fact that because, if you have a normal base and you have a big miniature, the base isn't competing so much with the miniature for that attention, yeah? So I think two things with it is that make the base stand out and enhance the kind of miniatures, but also that actually kind of disappears a little bit in your mat as well.
Yeah.
So because if it doesn't, you will still see that kind of square base, and I think if you can play with that. So if you're basing adheres to the map perhaps is also important, as well as how the basing is done itself, because you get that kind of immersion to it. And for me, the immersion is important. I can play on felt and have a good game. Unpainted miniatures. I'm not against that, but I think at least one project a year I try to kind of give that little extra effect to it. Also, you have this. Some friends I have, they base, and they put damage counters, like these dice on their bases and so on. And it's all great, but it's kind of like you have these guys who are 6 millimeter tall, and then there's a 10 millimeter dice behind them, sits in a little box.
Yeah.
And with all, respect to anyone, but to me that is kind of a little bit of a immersion breaker. It's and again, you can kind of find ways to do it, for example. So for me, it's, trying to find clever ways of marking things, for example. So for this readout for Poltava, for example, I made readouts, and they are squarish things, basically with earth walls. And I have one little base I put in there with soldiers firing. You take that out, and you have another base with all these dead people in it, yeah? So you don't need to put that's the status. So the marker is actually in the game, So basically, if they're up and firing, it means that it still has its full potential. If they're all lying dead, then obviously it's just some earth walls there. So I think I'm quite keen on that aspect, to try to declutter these battlefields. I know, it's difficult, and sometimes it can, immerse itself. I started a Rommel project some time ago, and I used tufts, for example, to indicate combat strength. And then I used certain colors as well. And once you know that, you kind of can see it quickly, instead of having, I was doing it in 3mm, actually, 3 millimeter tanks. And then you have this label saying, these are 3 millimeter tanks because we are too small to be seen otherwise. But it's that aspect I want to take away, if possible, to get that immersion, actually make it look like a battle and not something else.
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rommel was something I wanted to discuss, because, you were saying that, for you, it's all about the big battle, making it look like a battle and trying to declutter it as much as possible. But we look at what, I've copied Gareth from ADC Painting, his ideas for playing Rommel. And I've shamelessly copied that, which is basically to make it less of a war game base, but more of a board game base. Where I've got all the information I want to play the game on the base, but using very small amount of figures. So you say, like, this is a company, 6 mil figures on there plus a half track.
Yeah.
This is my infantry company. So I've sort of gone the other route, but I'd be really interested to see what you've done with Rommel and see.
Whether, yeah, so very little. So there, because I started and then I kind of butterflied on something else. But there is if you go to, in your own time, but I have a blog post called "Getting Ready for Sam Mustafa's Rommel," and it's on Roller One webpage. I talk a little bit about what ideas I had on basing and so on, and how I wanted to kind of move that forward. So. You can kind of check out, but it's the same as you. I wanted to have all the information there. I just wanted to, instead of putting a label saying 3, I'll put 3 tufts in a certain color to indicate that whatever strength that had that unit. So it's the same information, just using a different way of displaying it. So it's back to this. So the objective is the same, Mike. It's just how you kind of, how you do it. It was to get away of those labels. And another one was to have I had a label under where, if you wish, it was a magnetic label, and it could be basically you could turn it around as a label for it itself. So if you have a look at that, you see some of the ideas there. So again, there was some information written, but I tried to limit the kind of information. So because again, in 6 mil you get like the tank is now smaller than any readable character you have on that information sheet. So it was trying to give a balance between the game information and the actual thing itself. So it's similar, for example, in Chain of Command, for example, the suppression markers I basically made the same shape as the suppression markers that the that the two Lodis uses, but instead of writing suppression on top of it, I put some cotton and then I put some sand. I kind of glued on top of the cotton, so it looked like the earth was disturbed and sand was flying around to represent the fact that you are now suppressed because you're being fired on, yeah? So small things like that to kind of add to so you don't need to see a marker that says suppression, but actually see a marker that indicates that there's some firing going on in your direction, yeah.
That's a good idea. And bring us on to a completely different topic of declutterizing wargames. So you're going to have to come back on to talk about that.
Yeah, but it is again, because if you have smaller scales, you're actually competing with the clutter. It becomes a bigger competitor if you're only 6 millimeter tall, yeah? Suddenly that marker is a big impact on your physical reality compared if you're 28 millimeter tall, if that makes sense, yeah?
Yes.
So it's kind of building that immersion. So I think that's what I'm kind of what I'm on about. But again, you know, I'm happy to play games where we have those markers, but it's just taking that step extra. Or for example, so I like casualty marker, for example, where you have a dial or something like that rather than a die on the table. You know, where you actually have a round circle where you can say how many shock or whatever you have. I'm all for that kind of thing.
And of course, the other thing, you talk about immersion factors, and of course that sort of scale, and this is what you were talking about with actually kind of building your boards, is that it becomes that the board that you play on is almost is as important as the figures, isn't it? It's the whole kind of visual impact of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And things are important. So, for example, what I found is trees on battlefields. And trees are very important, you know, to create that feeling and get the immersion for me. And very often, if you look in some of the tables I've done, I put trees always in the corners and stuff, even if they are not needed or will not be important for the terrain per se. Mm-hmm. Just creating that overall kind of impression that we're actually taking a snapshot of some kind of terrain here. And I have, you know, I probably have 1,000 based trees, you know, and in somewhere in the garage there's a big collection now. And now I'm just nervous when I did this to do actually. That's why I've done more recently, because I want to create that kind of big thing. There are some solutions out there. So, for example, you can buy these bigger blobs, if you wish, of forest that are like canopies, yeah. And I've used that in the past, but I now have so many trees. I just put those trees out because those canopies have certain things. When you go to a show, you have limited space, for example, if you want to lift your tree canopy off and it's, 1 by 1 feet wide, you have to put that canopy somewhere, yeah. And if you don't have a side table, which you don't have, what shows, where the hell do you put it? Basically, these are canopies you can have your troops under. You can lift them up, yeah.
Yeah.
So and they are great, but if you play on a table like I used them here at home, and you have a little side table, you can lift them up and put them there, it's great, yeah. But otherwise you have to, where do you put them? Shall I put this canopy now on top of some other miniatures? So again, you just have to think about what is the setting where you do it, and I unfortunately nowadays it takes me 1.5, 2 hours to set these tables up, so they are not, my tables are not necessarily ideal for what you should do at home, yeah. So I think one is the kind of show game, and another one is what you do at home. And I have to admit occasionally that I have less immersion when I just have a game with my son for fun. Yeah. So I'm not saying this is how you have to play it, but I think when you go out, the same as you go to a party, you might not bring your kind of tatty jeans. You might actually wash them and, brush yourself up a little bit. So I'm not showing what I do at home always. Yeah. So,
yeah. Before we get into our next subject, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, when we look at sort of doing large battle games, because I think this is where 6mm shines, is the ability to play a whole battle, or as you say, a large section of a battle. What rules would you go for playing these games? So I'm not asking you to cover the whole period. So you mentioned Polymath, a great set of rules, and obviously that covers an awful lot of. There's different Polymath rules out there, isn't there, for different periods of history.
Yeah.
But with those, what other sort of rules would you sort of look at if you wanted to play
Yeah.
6
So basically, again, Polymos is what we started with. We actually, so I still base to what is the Polymos standard, and we still play some Polymos games. But recently, Nick has it's a rule set called Twilight of the Sun King, and they are very much similar in terms of scope. So we're still dealing with, because the key in Great Northern War is the battalion level kind of game. So normally each battalion is 6 by 3 centimeters, if you wish, 2.5 inch frontage, and basically Twilight of the Sun King is a different set of rules. In many aspects, I really like them because they're very much like, back again to this kind of total battle experience. You don't actively engage with each individual unit in the same way as you do in a lot of war games, where they're absolutely appropriate. I play skirmish. I want to attack with my guy. I want to see whether he kind of, gets damaged or not. And that's fine. It's back to this. If you have a role-playing game and you kind of come into a fight and someone says to you, well, roll a die and see whether he survives, you'll think, hang on, what's going on here, But in a war game where you have, maybe 30, 40 bases, you might not want to do attack, defense roll and etc. for all of them. So Twilight of the Sun King has this kind of, the key feature of it is the fact that you move up and there's movement rules, but then you roll for the morale of your unit. And it's basically assumed that, and it's based on where that unit is in relation to other units on the table. So if, for example, if you are a green Russian unit in the early part of the Great Northern War, and you are within charging distance from a Swedish elite unit, that means that you're more likely to go brown in your trousers than, so you basically roll for your morale, and you might have, so it's basically, do you stand and deliver or do you run away? That is the main factor in the game. So actually you don't do attack rolls in the same way. So it is about the position of your soldier with those things. And some people might find that abstract and so on, but for me it gives you that feeling, and it's back to this thing where we talked about with this Greek hoplite rules, that as a commander there you actually see what's going on, and it's more how people react to what's happening there. You're actually not in there doing that micromanagement fighting, and I find that fascinating, that aspect of it. Other rules we have used which are totally different are, for example, Maurice, the rules that Sir Mustafa did. I really like them for kind of what I call medium type of engagement, medium-sized battle. We played it. My son quite likes it because it's card-driven and have all these events, and he likes to sit there with a few kind of surprises on his hand, which he always seems to get the big ones. So, for example, I'm going to the attack with I'm able to fire first, but then he has this card that miraculously makes that he can fire before me. So it has all that nice friction into it that perhaps we have seen in other kind of skirmishy games that I quite like. So you can kind of get a lot of different experiences. You can get the kind of laid back armchair kind of view, which I think the Twilight of the Sun King does, or the more kind of active big battle, which Maurice does. And those some of the games I've tried. I've tried a few others, but I think those are the ones that at the moment are kind of what I feel are capturing what I want in the games there. But then there is the additional aspect that I said of the periods is that there are, for example, for 6mm we have used a sword and spear is great for 6mm, and we also have used, we tried a little bit with the little one DBA and tried to learn him to read proper English, to read the DBA rules and for him to explain them to me, but he failed.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't read the DBA rules and explain them back to you, Per.
Yeah, no, but yeah, but
I think anybody who can deserves a prize.
Yeah.
But also what you can do as well in 6mm. So that's a little bit those kind of the big battles, because for me I want to see kind of more like that is kind of free flowing. I don't want to have to make those rolls, if you wish, those 3-4 rolls for each kind of fight. Yeah, when I play a big battle in skirmish, I love it. It's fascinating this and that. So for me, I'm looking for those kind of rules in in 6 mil, because that means that you can still play a big battle and it won't kind of take forever. Yeah, because I think some of the kind of scaled up skirmish rules that are, to be honest, a lot of them are, and they have actually not necessarily much period flavor, are difficult to kind of play a game that feels right in the right time scale. So you end up in the situation you played your game and then you say, oh, it seems like the left flank has kind of fallen, and let's say that I won, so you get all these incomplete battles. But I mean, there's a lot of rules out there. I'm kind of not necessarily kind of try them all. There's a rule set called Go På, which I admittedly have a little dent in my Great Northern War kind of, because I actually haven't played it. I have the rule set, and that's really what I will try to do next. And that is interesting games. There's features, for example, that obviously in the gunpowder era, black powder era, you get a very kind of messy battlefield after all the muskets gets fired off, and it has rules for that. So it deteriorates sight and so on as the battle goes on, and I find that fascinating. Actually captures, and that's periodic stuff that you won't get, when you're fighting with two-hand swords against each other. So for me personally, and I this is not like a review of in that sense, but I think for the type of stuff I am interested in, I would say Twilight of the Sun King is a good rule set. Abstract, but good, yeah.
Well, I can feel a review show coming on at some stage.
Yeah, it would be.
I
mean, you should contact Nick, because Nick has done another version of the rules, which are about the 30 Years' War as well, and the English Civil War, which is an adaptation of those same rules. It's I really enjoy those rules. There is a little bit of people perhaps who don't like that abstraction, but again, it's attitude and get over it, or just don't play something else. It's everyone's individual choice in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing, I remember was that there's also, just to help people taking pictures though of their 6mm miniatures.
Crikey, yeah. Well, yeah, you say 6 mil, but
no, yeah, but I'll come to that in a second. So,
okay, go on.
So I try to do some vignettes sometimes. So basically, I'm building up for this Poltava battle, and occasionally post a little bit of things, and then taking some individual shots. And I was thinking there one day, because very often I use the screen on my laptop. When I want to try to find a color to match a camouflage scheme or something, I hold up my Vallejo kind of color in front of the screen. Now I know that the screen not always showing the color it should be, but at least it's showing a color that looks the same as on that picture.
Yeah.
And I was showing that, and on a blog post, and I took a picture, and I thought, hang on. And so what I do is I just put the miniature in front of my computer screen, and basically use that, whatever background I want. So if I want to find a field somewhere in Ukraine for my Poltava stuff, I find a field in Ukraine, and then you basically take a shot where you show some of your miniatures and you use that background. Some great effect. In the past, I've set up tables, these kind of boards. You can buy railway boards, whatever landscapes, and have in the background, etc. Or you have to buy some kind of green mats or whatever, green material, so you can edit away the background in some kind of software. And it's cumbersome, but this basically is a very simple way. You just use your computer screen. I put my teacup upside down in front of it, and then I put my miniature on top of that, and it produces some backlight as well, the screen, if you have a sharp screen. So it's very good, to take pictures. And since I put that little out, I've seen a lot of people started using it more actively. Probably people used it before, I don't know, but I just thought I'd done it and people liked it, so I thought I'd tell them what I did, and that was it. It's very simple.
It's like simple, but absolutely inspired.
Yeah.
It was brilliant, because that was some. Again, it's one of those things of, you see things like, taking photos in light boxes, and then trying to use graded paper behind miniatures and what have you. And then that idea, depending on your photos, you've got to be a little bit careful about reflection off screens, and so you've got to kind of creatively play with your framing or creatively play with your subsequent cropping to kind of, get rid of any glare or what have you. But just that whole idea of saying, oh, right, okay, so what we'll do, we'll have something in the background that looks real, so it's a realistic background. And of course, it's going to be out of focus anyway, because the focus is on the miniature in the first place. But it was just absolutely inspired post. I was, and then when you, okay, well, this is how I do it. And it was like, wow. So yeah, I'll freely admit I immediately stole that idea.
Yeah, it's perfect. That's why I put it out. Yeah.
Yeah, for when I was doing, when I was taking photos of my Lord of the Rings stuff, and I will be using it in future because it's a brilliant idea.
So it's the blog post on the Roller One blog, which I've been writing now for 3 years. I've done 150 bloody blog postings. Most of them have been my sweat and tears, to put it out. And it's the most popular blog post I've done. So it's actually outperformed the Saga in 6mm, which I did 3 years ago. So you had 3 years of people looking at that a lot, yeah. And this one has kind of in a month or whatever has outperformed that. So obviously, because it has a general appeal to it, and the way, of course, I do it in that blog post is I show it with 6mm, but then I take one of my 54mm and say that it seems to work with this too. So it's a generic post, and I think the lesson learned from that, I think, is that as we all work in our own little, box rooms or wherever we do our miniature stuff, is that when we do something that we really say wow to ourselves, just share it with people, because even if it's something someone has done before, we are not in a wargames environment. We're not in an environment where we say, oh, I've been doing that since, 6 years ago or whatever. It's not that kind of surrounding. Everyone is happy to see something for the first time. And I think that is one of the important stuff. So I started a blog 3 years ago, and I did it mainly to kind of, document my hobby, but also to focus myself a little bit. And it's been so rewarding, the fact that people send messages and they interact. Of course, a lot of people just come and have a look because you get kind of information from the host provider I'm using on how many people come. But there's some people who engage every week, and there's some people who ask me questions, on I get a lot of emails about the stuff I do and advice and so on. And it really has kind of made this hobby that sometimes can be a little bit lonely. And I'm talking about the hobby step of it, very engaging. And it's cool that people kind of are interested in what you do and share what you do and give you advice sometimes. So really it's for all the bloggers out there, we talk about, is it convenient or not to do it? For me, if one person looks at what I do and say, look, it helped me, that's kind of really enough, because I'm not doing it for others, I'm doing it for myself, in that. And if someone else can get use for it, that's even better, So so that's a little kind of diversion, but yeah, that's so that little post, a lot of engagement on it, and it shows that a little, for me, bleeding obvious things actually has been very useful. So that's good.
Sure. So we've spoken about using 6mm for large battles.
Yeah.
You're also quite keen on using 6mm for games which were probably written for 6mm. And I know that I've had this conversation with Neil, and I'm about to now to be taken to pieces with, as you two, tell me I'm wrong.
I remember back in the day that I was chatting with Mr. Luff about the possibility of doing Saga in 6mm, and because we were 6mm fans, we were kind of going, whoa, why don't we do this? Now we just talked about it. Next thing you know, I get a phone call because, we don't get email, as we've already heard, we don't get emails from Per, we get phone calls. I get a phone call from Per, saying, you were chatting about this. I can't remember. I mean, how long ago was this, Per? 4 or 5 years ago we were chatting about this on the show?
It's about three.
I mean,
three and a half, maybe.
I know it was. I know it was like 3.5 years or so ago. You suddenly went. Right.
Maybe it's 4 or 5 years ago then. Yeah, when Saga came out, I think. Yeah, maybe it was something like that.
Yeah, and then anyway, I then get a phone call from Per, kind of going, right, I'm going to do it, because he's like, okay, we kind of laid the seeds, and we didn't actually go particularly forward with it. However, as we've already heard, that Per, when he puts his mind to something, doesn't tend to do things by halves, and so the next thing you know, I get a phone call from Per about doing 6mm Saga. The rest, as they say, is history. Per, would you care to elucidate on what happened?
Yeah, so basically, I looked at Saga and I thought I kind of really liked it, and I thought you have all these, as I said before, is for us, from up north, it's like colonial wargaming, and it was like that era, the age of the Norse, strong, etc. And so then I just fancied giving it a go, and I thought 6mm, why not? I mean, by this time, this is now 4 years ago. For me to paint up 6mm is quite easy, and I thought Peter Berry had a range of Dark Age stuff, and I bought some just when it came out, just because they were, that kind of era, and I felt that kind of Norse blood flowing through. I had them lying around, and I thought, yeah, let's try these out. So for Saga, I decided it's typically a 28mm game, and what I did for Saga, it's a little bit different in some of the other applications. I actually replaced each individual miniature, in other words, normally on a 25mm kind of base, with a square 25mm base of basically more, about 8 on average 6mm figures. And again, it was back to this thing that, okay, so typically in Saga, you had the levies, which are 12 miniatures to a point, if you wish. So that's a typical unit. So I would use 12 bases. But for the levies, I used 4 small 6mm miniatures. And that means that you could see a base and you say there's 4 guys on that. That's a levy. For the warriors, which has 8 to a unit, I used 8 individual miniatures on each base. Mm-hmm. And then for the Hearthguard, if you wish, the elite ones, I used again a row of 4 times 4, so 4 by 4, 4 and 4, sorry, so that's 8. And then I used a heroic characters on front to indicate that this is now a little stronger unit. And then for the Warlord, which is only one base, I tended to use again a rank of 2 lines with 4 soldiers. It's another 8, but then have 2 guys on top. So you could, so not on top, on the front. So you could quickly see that on the individuals what kind of class they were, etc. And basically, after a lot of deliberation, researching how far a bow can be shot and how far a javelin can be thrown, I realized that the only real issue was that perhaps the javelin distances, if you took down now we're talking ground scale, yeah. So that the javelin perhaps in 6mm equivalent would be too long range. However, a little bit of leap of faith, I just ignored that and I just went on and played Saga as it was written with those bases.
Yeah.
The only thing we didn't tend to do when we played it was that we tend to mass up the units as blocks rather than individuals. And then we obviously fighting in houses isn't so common, if you're like a big unit, so different. So instead we tended to use kind of small fortifications and things to use instead of houses. But really, to be honest, and I now played Saga in 28mm with a friend of mine on times. I kind of prefer back this 6mm I used to do.
Yeah.
So basically I did warbands for each faction that existed in Age of Vikings for the first edition. You can actually go there. If you go Saga in 6mm, you probably found those entries. I've wrote quite a lot of blog posts on it. And we then took it to Joy of Six, and we had some celebrity help out there as well. And so
very minor celebrity help.
but in my little world, you're a great celebrity, Neil. You know, so there you go. But anyway, so what's your experience of playing it? Then did you feel that it was different, or that it worked or didn't work? I mean, what's your view on it in retrospect?
Generally, it works exactly the same. Because your troops tended to be, for want of a better phrase, more formed. Because you were using square bases, so they tended to be almost like moving large elements around, rather than the kind of slightly more haphazard way that Saga generally works.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, it works perfect. It worked perfectly well, and just almost like pretty much exactly as you'd envisaged it. Yeah, there was very little difference. It was literally just a case of it from becoming effectively it was a zoomed out version, wasn't it? So so your warbands just basically became larger.
Exactly, and I think the way what to look for in rule set is that where you don't necessarily have that individual feel to the rules, and Saga doesn't, in the sense that although because of the models we have, we envisage that that's our warlord, and he can do this and that, or he can kind of do all this stuff. But actually, in the rules themselves, that isn't necessarily the thing. You can't do the same in Chain of Command, for example. You can replace your company commander with your platoon commander with a base of 8 guys. Yeah, it would just kind of be wrong, in that sense. Or your junior leader. Yeah, so what you can do, and we'll talk about that for some of the other adaptation we come to, but what you do then is you replace a 28 with a 6mm, which is a different, and we'll come to that when I talk about some of the other games. But here is basically to say, is this game based on individuals or not? Well, it is in Saga. It's not. It's a kind of abstract games. And what then works is that the warlord, the one base with the warlord with these guys, becomes more the warlord and his personal guards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what that unit represents. And basically, when you look at it, so it creates more that kind of raiding warband size. That you could think like this. This is now like a number of crews from a number of boats that has come and kind of attacks and so on. And it works, and really it's the same as you play DBA in 6mm or you play DBA in 28mm, because basically all you're using is a frontage and a base. Yeah. So that's what Saga became, and the javelin again was the only thing potentially where the distances were, didn't really work. When you think that the distance you could throw a javelin, actually in real term, if you compare with the scale of a 6mm guy, would be far longer. But I kind of rationalized in my own mind that instead of changing it, because again, it's back to then, are you now changing the balance of the game? So for example, if I now allow firing to do in a different game, then all that play testing that's gone into a game might be upset by you changing that rule.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't advise it until you actually have time to test it. And being me, I was up to the wire of actually putting it on at Joy of Six. So I didn't have time to test whether that would imbalance stuff. Because some of the Saga factions use Javelin. And if you suddenly kind of limit what they can do. So I think the thing is, I just use a play for the game. And if you could get yourself to that kind of situation. So other games that I've used, if we go to when Gaslight came out, I thought, great. And again, as I said to someone, I downscaled it, but actually made it more expensive than I would have. If I would have bought Matchbox cars or Corgi cars and just converted them, would have cost, very little. Instead, I decided to do it in 6mm, Gaslands. And, so here is basically taking a game and making it smaller, miniaturizing it, It's basically, so Gasland have these maneuver dials, and I got them specially made at half the size than they had before. So basically, I have a set of 6 maneuver dials which I got. It's the same guys who produced the original ones. I don't remember but again, if you look at Gasland, it's 6mm on roller1.com. It's quite extensively gone through what models you can use. But so basically, I just took the game and just halved all the distances in it. So the maneuver dials are now slightly different. But what it means is, and this is what the benefit is with miniaturizing so the Saga game still play on the same surface as the original game. Yeah. But miniaturizing means that I now have a 2x2 track that we use with a little one that we put out when we play Gaslands. I have a little box with stuff, and we can basically put it out on our lounge table. I don't have a dedicated game room, you see, so we always have to have this situation where we play, and then it's time for the rest of the family to engage in things like dinner, etc. So we kind of sit there and we're quite happy to plow on, but we now have to clear the table or whatever. So some of the stuff I've done with 6mm, and that's why I've done it. End of the day, and coming back to this fact that 6mm is great for big battles, and that's really its forte. I've just done a few experiments, in the sense, I'm not saying, this is the way forward. Still, if you play skirmish games, you probably, 28mm is probably cooler, but the benefits with 6mm is that you get a different experience when you miniaturize it. You basically get more like you play chess. It means that both players sit down in front of each other at a normal dining table. You don't need to stand there. You actually can look, and because you're now sitting down, you're kind of closer to the action than you are when you're standing up, if you're with me. So the small scale doesn't disturb as much, So you now sit down and you can actually move about within your arm length, your figures on that scale. So we have a 2x2 board, which I've done with, for the Gaslands, that we kind of drive around, and we happily sit there like we play chess and have a good time, So that's what I did with Gasland. I've also, a few years back, we took Dragon's Rampant, and we took that to Joy of 6. And again, we miniaturized it, but instead of using bases, we use a miniature to replace. So they typically have 6 and 12 in their kind of little units of individuals. And we use something that in the Pikeman's Lament rules that is part of that. There is Michael Leck talks about something that he has used, which is something called 1-2-3 basing. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with it, but basically it means that when you have this kind of what I call clumped up skirmish units, have 12 guys, for example, very often people use this kind of movement trace, and that coming back again to, and I know it's great and so on, but that's back to that immersion thing again. So, you then basically get that formed base coming against you. And I know that there are some skirmish bases where they're a little bit, randomly selected, but still you now have 28 mils on a base, but what he uses, and even a 28 mil, is that he bases all his miniatures. So 12 miniatures in a unit would be based 1 guy on one base, 2 guys on another base, and then 3 guys on a third base, and he does that twice, So you basically, now your unit has 2 individual based miniatures, 2 bases that has 2 on them, and 2 that has 3 on them. So you only have 6 bases for 12 units. And it means that if you have not individual, but any character take away, for example. So if you have 12 soldiers, if you lose 3, then you take away 3. It doesn't matter if it's the guy with a red scarf or the guy who has, a skull on his helmet. You kind of take away 3. They're not individuals in that sense, But so that means that what you now can do is you take away the base with 3. And that means that you have 9 left on 5 bases. And you can do, with that 1, 2, 3, you can do all kind of combinations, So, for example, if you have 6 individuals in your unit, let's say 6 warriors, and you have 1, 2, 3 bases. You have 3 bases. If you lose 1, you take the individual base away. So you now have 2 bases with 5 in total. If you lose another one, you put back the individual miniature and you take the base with 2 miniatures away. So you now have a base with 1 plus 3 miniatures. And it sounds complicated, but it becomes quite easy after a while.
And I suppose it does away with this thing of where you have movement trays which start having spaces in them where you're taking individual figures off them.
Yeah, and that's back to this thing where, again, with due respect, to me it looks dreadful. When you have 3 guys on a 12-unit movement tray, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, give up the tray now, mate, Throw it,
Yeah.
no, but at that point, yeah? But I understand all that stuff, yeah? But now, if you take that basing into 6 mil world, then that is very beneficial, because suddenly you can play individual miniatures without having them individually based, all of them. So I take that into a 6 mil. So I've done that for some British colonial stuff. So I'm talking Sudan, etc., Zulu Wars. So I did that for The Men Who Would Be Kings, and it's great, like in the sense that you then play with this setup, and you actually miniaturize it. And because you use that basis, you actually get very little to manage. And your biggest base would be about 20 centimeters. And then your smallest, I usually use 12 centimeters. I use like this kind of, what are they called? Fender washers or whatever. Thin ones. And there is basically a fact of miniaturizing it. Similar for example, for sharp practice. I have a full set of stuff for that as well. Some of the support options you have in sharp practice are, for example, you can have a water cart or a munition cart. You can have a doctor, etc. And so I painted up generically, because in sharp practice, you have the red and the blue side, yeah?
Yeah.
So what I have done is I have and I bought, you can buy all this stuff from different manufacturers, but I basically have a red ammunition cart and a blue ammunition cart. And basically they just happen to be in a bluish kind of color, the cover for it. I simply have a doctor that is dressed in some nice clothes, and they're mainly reddish. They have a doctor that is mainly bluish, And these are, again, back to this fact that we can quickly see that guy belongs to that part of the thing. So again, for sharp practice, just looking at it, just doing all those individual miniatures. And originally I used movement trays and I used individual figures, but when I sussed this 1, 2, 3 basing, I kind of changed to that, and it works brilliantly. But the key is sit down, 2 by 2 kind of feel works, and it's a different experience. But with 6 mil, again, you can still get all that level of clutter that you expect. We looked earlier on what we were tempted to do, and you told me about this. I've forgotten it already, about this amazing 28 millimeter buildings that.
Tabletop World. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the key things there is the level of details in it. And to me, forgive me again, if I would do 28 mil, that's where I would go, with my stuff, because if you have all that ability, I wouldn't like to have just a straight kind of MDF kind of building structure on it, But again, so it's the same in 6 mil. You can buy some of this clutter, already. So, for example, there's a company called Perfect 6 out there, and it's a small company, but he sells a lot of this battlefield stuff that you can use in 6 millimeter. They kind of add to that thing, and you can buy, like a little pack with sacks or some barrels and things like that, and it adds to that immersion immediately, So there's 2 things. So what I'm talking about is miniaturizing it, and basically you just use different. Sometimes they say use centimeter instead of inches. I tend to use half inches instead. And people say, oh, how do I deal with that? Well, just do a measuring stick, half inches, and it's done, and just use that to measure your stuff. So you don't need to kind of conceptually change your world or understand something or transfer anything. All you need to do is take a wooden stick, mark half inches on it, and use that instead of your normal measuring tool. So, you don't need to make it difficult for you. You can just miniaturize it in that sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. As you say. So, I think on the sharp practice side, it's like, was it the first one you did was French Indian War?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and just work again, because that was the conversation we were having about doing Napoleonics, and you kind of went, and then you went, oh yeah, okay, we'll do that French Indian War, and especially using that 1, 2, 3 basing again. It's
yeah.
Now,
Now there are. It depends. So the trick here is a little bit to check what miniatures are available as well for the project.
Yeah.
Because so little trick I've used here is I've used certain ranges where there are certain types of miniatures available. So French Indian works really well for two reasons. One is that there is enough animated available miniatures. So for example, if you have people that are just standing still, holding their rifle up, great for big bases with 6mm miniatures, and also big bases for any other scale. But sometimes they don't look as cool in a skirmish environment, because even I've seen sharp practice sometimes in 28mm, and they all kind of marching pose. To me, it's kind of, come on, you have all these options in 28mm, and you have 12 guys who are standing marching, none of them firing, it looks a little bit in that sense, but in 6mm it sometimes doesn't look as great. So I tend to use skirmishers code, and even if they are not, and paint those as would they be the line. So just to make it a little bit more dynamic. So if you look at some of the stuff I'm kind of avoiding, it could be sometimes where they're a little bit too stale, the typical fare, because there is obviously not a great deal of different poses you have in 6mm, so it can be a limitations from that point of view. So you have to kind of look at what is available. So French Indian War, for example, the codes they have for the Indians there are very animated. They're kind of running, etc. Similar, they have some kind of more like skirmish type of stuff that I use a lot. They have the militia, for example, they have different versions, and they are firing again. So before you throw yourself into it, have a look what kind of type of poses they have, so you can get some variety in it. And that's my kind of advice on that. I think.
Cool. Excellent stuff.
Okay, so Per, you mentioned a few times about playing games with your son. So, I know that you do quite a lot with your family, but how's that sort of affected your hobby, having the little one playing?
Well, first of all, it's a different perspective of things, because as I said before, I'm kind of interested in the big battle, the kind of a little bit laziness where I give orders and I see what happens on the battlefield and so on, whilst, Max, as it's called, is more into skirmish games. He's more into kind of want to have a personal attachment to the miniatures on the table, that he does, she does, rather than the unit does. And obviously I'm very keen to kind of involve them. I mean, my family is excellently supportive of what I do. I mean, I spend probably too much doing this than perhaps I should, if I'm honest sometimes. And they are very supportive. I mean, we go to Joy of Six. It's a kind of a annual event. The whole family is there. They chip in and help out on the show, etc., and so on. And so I have two daughters, and they kind of been supportive in the sense of leaving me alone, rather than engaging in it. But my son really much, is in that age now where he's kind of much coming into it, and basically I'm trying to encourage him to do painting with him. So one of the things, for example, is that I've started looking at different ways of quickly painting 28mm miniatures. So, for example, for Christmas, I kind of cajoled him, or I'm joking, but in a way of buying this Legion, for example, Star Wars Legion. And then suddenly we end up with 2 base sets and all these miniatures and oh my goodness,
Yes.
We have to paint this, and so found on the net quite interesting kind of guides on, so you search for things like how to quickly paint up your Legion stuff, that kind of thing. And I found a few pages that does it quickly. One was quite interesting where we basically painted up them using inks. So basically the rebel sides were based in kind of desert yellowish, so that was just normal Africa corps kind of, and then you used inks on top. I haven't used inks to that kind of degree, and basically the little one painted on. And I know it's not like this contrast paint, but if you use ink on certain colors, it creates quite cool effect. And we quite quickly kind of painted up those sets. And the Stormtrooper is quite easy, spray painting and then inking again. So for me, I've realized that the versatility of inks that I haven't before, and also the fact that with some minimal instructions, I could, tell my, end of primary school kid to paint relatively decent miniatures, that you could happily put on the table, even if it wasn't for the purpose that he had done them. And that's great. So that's one side. And also the fact that basically kind of encouraged me to try some of the games that perhaps I normally wouldn't try. I'm really love Star Wars, and I'm a great fan. I'm not sure I would have picked up Legion otherwise, to be honest, if it wasn't that he was interested. I find it interesting. And also there's a Facebook group that talks about chain of command in Star Wars, Star Wars chain of command, and I find that quite fascinating. And obviously that is, we could just use, because basically 2 base sets is more or less a platoon on each side. And I just think you could just play it straight out of the box, so that could be a reason to get him involved in chain of command without him even knowing it. So that's great. But also it's other sides. So we went to Salute, for example, and we've been to a few wargame shows together. But this year was special because he was so into it. It was almost like him driving the whole experience there. And we went to play games. He wanted to get involved in. He's very much into World War II at the moment, and knows everything about tanks and how what steel sheets was used, what the penetration of certain weapons are versus this and that, etc. And one of the funniest things was, then we were there, we met Henry Hyde, and a quick chat with Henry, because I've known Henry for a few years, so obviously there is no kind of big drama about it. But afterwards, he said to me, "Was that Henry Hyde?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh shit!" And sorry, Dad, but I wanted to have a chat with him, because obviously, without me really kind of knowing it, obviously some of the books, and one of the books he read quite a few times is the Wargames Compendium. It's one of those books that if I were his age, I mean, I'm my age and I love it, but at his age, this would be like a treasure, in that sense, with all that, because it covers so many different things, And he says, "Oh, I would have asked him for an autograph," the little one said. And I just put it up on Twitter, And I just said, look, as a joke, because I thought it was funny that I was like swearing on the train afterwards. And Henry then, came back home, read it, and then he sent him this Donald Featherstone book, And, little one took the book, and read it, took it to his heart, and it was one of those things where you can just feel that that's a little memory that he will carry with him for the rest of his life, when he will say, just like Henry wrote in his dedication that he was given this book when he was a lad, he was 12 years old, from Featherstone. And obviously, as we know, I mean, Henry has been influenced a little bit and is someone who is very much into wargaming. Yes. And same with my son getting this thing. And I think for me, it's nice to kind of engage your kid and take them with you. And sometimes we drag around our kids to these shows just because, we have to be with them that day and so on. But I think that when you actually engage them in that show and engage them in what you do, you kind of get, great stuff. I mean, I met Mark Backhouse, for example. He was there with his son, and Mark goes there and he plays games with his son. That's his Salute experience. And I have, sometimes in the past, been there with the kids and you try to do something for them and for yourself and so on. But just remember that when you meet people and you stop, just invite them into the conversation. Then perhaps they actually get into that hobby too. And it was really nice, of Henry to kind of invite that. And I feel that a few years back when I took my daughter a few times, I remember especially one time, and there was this guy and he had a big table with miniatures, and I don't want to say who it was or what it was, but he was sitting there eating a McDonald's burger, and he had a Coke in one of these, and it looking like it's going to fall on the table any time. And then he asked my daughter to stand back, and she was just standing next to the table. And I'm just thinking, you're sitting here, you're slob, eating your McDonald's burger over your table, and that's fine, but daughter can't even stand next to it, you know? But what I find is that the hobby is more and more, I think, inviting, and I think we need to kind of think about that with our children, but also with other children that kind of come by those tables when we are at those shows. And if you treat your kind of table as a museum piece, then don't take it to wargame shows, please. You know, it's just send it to a museum. You know, and you know, if it's demonstration participation, you know, let people have a look at it. And that's what I'm grateful for, because most people are very welcoming to children on these shows. And you know, there'll be wargamers one day, and there'll be the people who need to buy those miniatures and those games to keep it, you know, going. So I think for me it's great, you know, and the encouragement. And I know that, you know, there are certain things which are, you know, the computer games nowadays are very immersive, you know, in that sense, and there is some big competition out there. But I hope that as we go along that he will have some kind of association to war games. It's not just something that Dad closed the door and went and did, you know, but actually something that he feels he's part of and engaged with. Yeah. So I'm really feel strongly about, you know, them having their place in the hobby too. Yeah. And respected, you know.
Yeah, damn right. And well done, Henry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Henry. It's brilliant. Yeah.
He's a nice guy. He'll probably have you on his show next, Per, because you know he does this.
Yeah. Well, but I think I said my piece that I've already. Yeah. I'm not sure I have anything more to say. You know.
Oh, so, Henry will find something for you to talk about.
Yeah. So I think, and actually, I don't know, but last time at Salute, actually, Josh was there as well. Neil, and he and the little one actually shared a game together. It was fun. It was the game that was the one where the Germans worked together with the Americans versus some fanatic SS troops to free some French political prisoners at the end of the war.
Oh yes, yeah.
And it was with the what are they called? Space Vixen guys.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, who always puts on a good show and always are happy to have children participate. My daughters played with them, you know, 15 years ago, you know, so
yes, a similar sort of thing. Josh got involved with them several years ago, and it's kind of looked them up every year since.
Yeah,
because
they are great.
Because they engaged with him, and you know, and he had a good time with them. So yeah, he does tend to look them up every time he goes to a show. Of course, these days, rather than him accompanying me around the show or me accompanying him, it's just a case of me getting the door, and then I probably see him when it's time to eat. And I'll probably then see him at the end of the day. And in the meantime, he's off doing his own thing. So you know, there is a particular pleasure with touring a show with your son and daughter, but also that time when you know they then turn around and go, right, okay, I'll see you later.
Absolutely, but that's normally. I mean, it's the same. I remember my oldest one first time we used to take her to school, and one day I realized she dropped the hand when we were about when we're getting close to school, like, and I felt that was the first step to independence, you know. But I think that when they are in that way where we kind of end up, if you wish, having to drag them around because we can't, you know, let them loose on their own at Salute at a certain age, just to make sure we engage with them in that experience and not kind of drag them around and see it as a chore, because frankly, it's probably best to leave your son or daughter home if you're just dragging them around, you know, and if you don't, you know, focus on their experience rather than your own, because I've been to enough Salute, so even if I'm there and making sure he has the best day ever, that's a better investment than just making sure I'm happy. So I think that when he get older, I'm happy to take him there, and I can focus on my thing, and he can run around. I'm looking forward to that as well. So
yeah,
good times.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the only thing really to sort of come on to is if for people who haven't tried 6mm
Yeah.
and want to give it a go after listening to this show, manufacturers.
Yeah, so there are quite a lot of manufacturers out there, and we mentioned a few already. So I'll start with Irregular Miniatures does 6mm. But one of the things we have to think about is, especially when we do things, is to check out what they are. Irregular 6mm are very similar to the irregular 2mm in the sense that they are more like blocks of it's you buy like a block of 4 or whatever, and they can sometimes even be connected individually. So you kind of have to almost accept the way they've been based. So Bacchus figures, for example, they come as individual guys. They might be lined in 4s, and that's how we tend to kind of base them, etc. So, for example, another consideration is that they don't necessarily mix very well, some of these 6mm. So you have to kind of check them out and decide this is the way I want to go. Some of them are mixed brilliantly, but some of them don't. So the first consideration is that. So Irregular has a very different way they are based. Some people like it, some don't. I'm kind of for me it doesn't work for me. But they have a lot of stuff, but they also have a lot of things that I do have. So they do an attack robot, for example, that looks pretty similar to some Doctor Who-ish creature. They're called attack robots, and I bought quite a few of those I have for a little science fiction project I'm doing, Doctor Who inspired, and they look like Daleks basically, but they're not. And then there is Heroics and Ross. Heroics and Ross has a very nice range of a lot of stuff. I mean, they tend to do. It's quite cheap to buy into compared to, for example, GHQ that also does similar stuff. So Heroics is used a lot for World War II stuff. Their tanks are done in different generations. So sometimes one tank might be slightly different in scale to another. At least that's my experience, yeah. But GHQ is more expensive stuff, but they do a lot of World War II stuff, yeah. Then we come to Bacchus, which I use, and Bacchus has a nice overall range. It is my favorite range, in the sense, and I also like what Peter tries to do with creating this totality concept, in the sense that if you want to buy, a way of basing your products, you can buy his set, you can buy, ready-made army packs, etc. Moving then into something very similar is Rapier Miniatures, a smaller range than Bacchus, but I would say in terms of sculpting and the way they feel, it's brilliant. I mean, you bought as well, Mike, these Laurent stuff, but they also do a lot of ancient stuff. They do a lot of biblical stuff, and their biblical range is bigger than the Bacchus ranges, for example.
Yeah,
they do some.
I was going to say they're fantastic. They're really nice range.
And for me, so I have some Rapier stuff. They also do a Greek mythology range as well, which is really interesting. That has like some of those kind of creatures that I have used in 6mm, like fantasy setting, which is interesting. Then you have Adler as well. Adler Miniatures. They do also 6mm. They tend to be a little bit maybe sizier than the Bacchus stuff. But they do ranges on. They're most famous for the Napoleonic stuff. I've used some of their miniatures. I tried to use them in some skirmish projects, but they're quite fragile. It works really well on. You base a lot of them on a base, but if you want to start having 1 or 2 on a base for these small skirmish projects, I wouldn't recommend them. But on the other hand, look, it's only morons like me who does it in 6mm anyway. But the skirmish. But what I'm saying is I don't want to take anyone off doing Adler for big Napoleonic battles. I've seen some beautiful stuff in that sense. So it's just a different way. They're all individually based as well. I mentioned a company called Perfect Six as well. They have a range of some fantasy stuff. He also does some other things that are associated with 6mm. There is Microworld Miniatures mentioned initially. They do fantasy stuff. They also have a unique 6mm Renaissance, and they have Landsknechts in 6mm that's worth checking out. Which is, for doing certain things, and they have Renaissance type of stuff. So this is kind of the period, if you wish, before 30 Years' War, doing things like Italian wars, etc. And to me, that's the only company that does that kind of period. And it's quite extensive, nice range, to be honest. For us in the UK, the difficulty of going with Microworld is that postage and potential customs hit and so on. But the miniatures are well worth it, to be honest. Sometimes, if you're going to spend, with prices, I mean, I have a lot of discussions with this with people, but taking a hit of even 20 quid on your order, look, you're going to spend maybe 6 months working on this. So you just have to take some relationship to what you're doing here, compared to that, etc. But yes, it will be perhaps costly to take it over. Those are the kind of key ones I have used. I mean, are there any others that comes to mind?
For me, I think, especially based in the UK, is Vanguard Miniatures for sci-fi.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Onslaught, all of those companies.
There is Brigade Games as well who do 6mm. Sorry, I'm kind of a little bit not tuned on the 6mm, so to speak. Or sci-fi. But yeah, I actually have a blue and a green army of sci-fi stuff from Brigade Games that I kind of bought at the Joy of Six a few years back, which I haven't done more than painted in those colors. But they are excellent actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my advice is to, maybe if you're interested, to order a pack from Bacchus or Rapier or Adler. And check them out and from Irregular, and ask them, could you send me a few? I think, some of them might even do samples. I know manufacturers of various reasons don't necessarily want to send out too much samples, etc. But really buying the cheapest pack, so from Peter Berry, buy one of his skirmish packs for 4 quid or whatever and pay the postage or whatever. Or why not just come to the Joy of Six in July this year, yeah?
I was about to say that. Let's have a big shout out for it.
So it's on the 7th July. It's on a Sunday. And it's, let's say that it's the best 6mm wargame show in the world. But it's also a damn good wargame show overall. And it's free if you're skeptical. They will give you free entrance on the day. It's in Sheffield. But you have to wear a badge that says 6mm skeptical on you for the day. It's worth going there, and obviously you can pick up those samples there, and have a look. And it is a good day, and I think if you kind of like wargaming and you like big battles and see it, you might surprise yourself when you go there, actually, if you haven't been into 6mm before. And it's a good journey. I will be there, and if you are, come and say hello. And if you went because I told you, then I might have a little kind word for you, if nothing else, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, it will be worth going to see the battle that Per is putting on. Per, I mean, he won't say it himself because he's far too modest, but Per's displays are awesome, and in the true sense of the word. And I mean, I've said to him in the past, it's kind of like, why haven't you taken a game like this to something like Salute, for example? And he's you kind of poo-pooed the idea, and it's like, no, this is on the level. Yeah, this is on a level with any display game that you will see at Salute. He puts his heart and souls into these, and they are truly a joy to behold. So it is. I mean, it's a good show. I know when we took Mr. Hitman last year, he complained us bitterly for putting a 6mm skeptic sticker on him when he was wandering around all day. Yeah. But having said that, he did very much enjoy himself. So Yeah.
And I think so. If you are around that, and I tell you what, a little trick as well is that this year Warlord Game will be there as well. They're perhaps more famous for doing 28mm, but they do a a game called Cruel Seas, and if you play Cruel Seas, you know what? You're actually doing 6mm wargaming. You know, people might not even realize it. So they will be there, and I don't know. Maybe if you want to buy some 28mm stuff from there, they probably take it with them, so you can save some postage as well. You know, while you look at this heretic doing 6mm as well. Yeah, so you might actually do yourself a favor. So. No, but it's a great show, and it's the reason I keep going is that it grows every year, and also the fact that I really kind of, you know, over the years I've become a good friend of Peter Berry, and you know, he has a vision, and I like the fact that he's actually inviting his competitors to this event in the sense of providing you know, it's not a Bacchus event at all. You know, it's Bacchus who runs it, but there's very much, you know, they have their trade stands and it's all the other traders, and you feel really like it's this is there to give credit to the scale of 6 mil and so on. And, you know, hopefully, you know, maybe they'll grow some, it would be fun to see perhaps some more kind of small scale focused things like this, you know, maybe the Joy of 2 mil or something. Mike Hobbs will set up soon. I don't know. You never know.
No, that's definitely something for Mr. Backhouse and Sid to.
I know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, I'm. Yeah, it's a great show. Now the secret is that probably we'll take it to the Poltava to Salute next year, but that's yet to kind of be decided. But it's depends a little bit whether the mat will last, you know, for more than one outing. I guess we can always fix it, but not with glue, yeah? So we'll see how it works, yeah? But I still have some work to do, because this weekend I was supposed to do the mat, and the mat is still rolled up. So I did those trees instead, just to save my kind of conscience. But we're running out of time. I'm actually going to this Market Laden event in 2 weeks' time. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to play this Malta game, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So Jeff will be running it then, Mike, if you're not going up.
Yeah, he will be.
He's
coming over later to pick up the planes and ships.
And then I'm playing some World War I with Bob. It's
Cool.
Chain of Command. I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't been to that event, so it'll be great stuff, I think. And then I have some other commitments in weekends, so we'll see when I finish this Poltava. It has to be before 7th of July, though. That's the drop dead date. Yeah.
Cool stuff. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time to wrap up. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is very proud to be sponsored by Firestorm Games, one of the largest hobby retailers in the country, with branches located at Victoria Road, Swindon, Tesco's in Newport, and the South Wales Gaming Centre, Trade Street, Cardiff. All the store locations offer areas for playing of board and card games. In addition, the Cardiff Centre offers the Battlefields, which not only provides over 60 tables for the playing of miniature games, but can also provide terrain for a number of different sci-fi, fantasy and historical settings. And don't forget, listeners to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast can attain an added discount at the Firestorm store and web store by using the discount code Mayday Meeple. That's Mayday Meeple, all lowercase. Check them out at www.firestormgames.co.uk. Hi everyone, Neil here. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, I'm wondering, would you consider becoming a patron of the show? For as little as $1 a month, you can help support us in what we're doing with the show. For that, you can get access to a monthly question and answer show, and that will also allow you to ask questions. If you pledge more, you potentially get bonus podcasts. And you never know, you might even get invited to be on the show yourself. If you want to know more details, please follow the link to our Patreon page, which is on the front of the website. That's www.meeplesminiatures.co.uk. Thanks a lot. So here we are, we've reached the end of another show, comprehensively covering 6mm and all sorts of other stuff. Thank you, Per. It's been great to chat to you. But before
That's excellent, thanks.
Great. Before we go, we need to talk about what Dave has bought this week. And in doing so, it covers another subject as well. The subject, perhaps, of a rant that I had the other week. On the last show. Right, okay, so I mentioned we were at Partisan. So we arrived at Partisan, and as we were wandering around, we approached the Anstey stand, which, as people may know, when Gripping Beasts aren't at shows, Anstey tends to take an amount of their stuff. And there was the Anstey stand, resplendent with lots of Saga Age of Magic stuff, including lots of dice.
Oh, that's handy.
And there was Lord S himself was on the stand. So first off, what did Dave buy? Dave bought the entirety of Saga Magic. So and of course he's not got second edition at all. So he bought everything and got the dice and waved them under my nose rather resplendently as he slipped them into his bag. Despite the fact that I bought Age of Magic before he did, he owns Age of Magic before me, which was a source of amusement for him for the rest of the day. Thank you, Mr. Hickman. However, I did mention to Lord S, the fact that how come you have all these dice resplendent upon your stand? And he looks at me because he said, mine are still on back order. And he went, yes. He says, see, herein lies the tale. The reason we have all these dice on our stand is because they landed in the country on Thursday. So they'd only been in the country 2 days. Now, apparently, just to explain to people, and those people who, like me, may have been maybe slightly peeved by the fact that they hadn't got their Saga dice if they'd have ordered by somebody who was using North Star as a distributor. However, what happened basically was they completely sold it out of their initial order of dice between Salute and the pre-order date, the pre-order launch date.
Mm.
The reason that happened was because they were new die cuts. They were new etched, new type of etched dice as opposed to just a reorder. They were basically told that they weren't allowed to use their existing supply finance scheme, that they had to pay for everything up front.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, and if you know anything about board game manufacturer, and also, you've heard Richard Clark talk about this in the past. Custom dice and cards are the most expensive things in Saga to produce. The dice and the card. Funny enough, I turned around and said about. I bet you the card, the spell cards they use I mean, even more expensive. And he looked at me with that long-suffering expression that only Lord S has.
Yes.
Which expressed almost a lifetime of pain in one single glance. But there we go. Yes. So yes. So apparently, what happened was they were told that they had to pay up front. So he turned around and said, "Yeah, we ordered as many as we could afford." And, knowing how expensive these things are, well, fair dues, And then they turned around and went, right, so, and then they immediately put in for a second order. And were told it was going to be 8 weeks. Now, one of the reasons behind this is that they used to produce their dice on because they ordered from a company in Poland, apparently.
Yeah.
And they used to have their dice produced on what is commonly known as the secondary machine.
Yes, the small one.
The small one. Now they're having their dice produced on the primary machine.
Yes.
However, that's the same machine that Games Workshop use. And the bottom line is, as he explained to me, is that the bottom line is, if they get an order from Games Workshop, it kind of takes precedence over everything else. And I think that Games Workshop put a reorder in for all their Shadespire stuff, because obviously Shadespire has a load of custom dice. So Gripping Beast, being the smaller company that they are in Games Workshop, got shoved to the bottom of the queue. They said now stupidly is they've had to put in 2 further orders for dice, and their delivery dates have been like 2 or 3 weeks. As opposed to just the first reorder, which was like, I mean, it's been ordered. It came in early, but originally they were told 2 months. I think it's taken them 6 weeks. So that's why we've had this sudden dearth of dice. It wasn't just the fact that. Well, they couldn't order the amount of stock that they wanted to, simply because. They had their payment conditions changed on them, and then the company turned around and went, the second batch is going to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. So real world problems, I would suggest. But apparently, we are told, or I am told, that I should be getting my dice next week from North Star, because although North Star were apparently Battlefield were chatting with North Star. And they have a minimum order quantity that you normally have to fulfill before you get stuff through. And there was a bit. Apparently, there was I understand there was a conversation happening about the fact that hang on a minute, But anyway, hopefully, I'm getting my dice next week. But therein lies the tale, and therein lies the tale of Mr. Hickman. Other than us sharing the costs of Greeks and War of the Roses, has got the entirety of Saga Magic before me.
Good for him.
Indeed. Okay.
I bought it in April. Yeah.
You got a salute in you, Per.
Yeah.
You got it all at salute. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I haven't used it yet, so there you go.
That's all right. I was Neil.
So we're equal for the moment.
Yeah.
On that phrase, boom, tish. Right, okay. And on that note, I think it's time for us to get out of here. So, first off, a huge thank you for Per for being on the show. Per, it has been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Thank you as well. It was time just flew away. Yeah, there's things here still to cover, but there you go. Let's leave it there. I really could use this bank holiday. Maybe do something else as well. So, but thanks for having me. Thanks, Guy, for running this show. It's part of my kind of must listen to all the time. And there's so many of that terrain and those 6 mil that's been produced whilst listening to your lovely voices. So from the bottom of my heart and from all those 6mm men and occasional ladies, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Per.
Per,
You're gonna have to come back on.
Yeah, that's it. There's
Yeah.
nothing for it. You are going to have to come back on. Most
Yeah.
definitely, yes. And
Thank you.
yeah, no, it's been cool. Thank you, mate. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you, Neil, once again. So it was good to be here.
Indeed, and we shall. I shall look forward to. I shall look forward to seeing you
Next weekend.
next weekend. This coming weekend.
Neil,
Yes.
can I just a very short one? Also, thank you to everyone who engages on the Roller One blog, and also everyone at Twitter and the occasional thing I post on Facebook as well. Thank you for the kind of encouragement for the stuff that is being done. And again, I'm not doing it for you guys, but I'm happy that you like it. There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Per. And once again, last thing to say is that yes, myself and Mr. Hobbs will be making an appearance all 3 days at the UK Games Expo, which is this coming weekend. As we record this, probably in real time, you'll have just finished killing us in Call of Cthulhu again, I imagine.
More than likely.
More than likely, yes. So yes, 3 days of all the very best in gaming at the UK Games Expo. We will be there, and if you're there, hopefully we will catch up with you over the 3 days. We'll be tweeting and various other bits and pieces from the show. So hopefully we'll catch up with you there.
Indeed.
Indeed. In the meantime, thank you once again for listening, everybody. We really appreciate it. Until next time, take care, and we'll speak to you in a few weeks. And I think next time round we'll be looking back at the UK Games Expo, and also Market Larden, which is Hobbsless.
Sorry, Mike.
I still haven't got over it, mate. I still haven't got over it.
Never have I.
No.
I've been practicing Delilah and everything.
Desperate times. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media. And here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.